Session. As a quick reminder for anybody who's with us in the building or listening online, this is informational purposes only. No action is taken by the commission during a work session. We do not accept public comment during the work session. However, we have a business meeting following that starts at 5:30 where we always have general public comment if you wish to provide any public comment accordingly after the fact. So with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Sarah. And I should make a quick note. We've got Commissioner Kelly online. For anybody watching, you can see him. He's with us remotely. And Commissioner Anderson is traveling today and a little bit delayed, but on her way. So she will probably be joining us in the midst of this. And we'll just get started now and keep it moving then. Sarah?
Thank you, commissioners. At this table, I've got our team that's part of our team that's been working to put together the 2026 proposed budget. I'm going to do most of the talking, but want anybody at the table to chime in if they need to. Also want to thank Bob Tryansky and Katie Fitzgerald, who've been intimately involved in getting their portions of the budget done as well. This is a budget preview. This is not a budget overview. For those of you that excitingly watch the county budget process each year, know that normally we start hearings with an overview, and we will do that again on July 7th. But we wanted to add this work session to kind of let you know where we are and kind of the factors that influenced moving into the from 2025 into the 2026 budget. And then at the meeting tonight, at the business meeting, you're going to get a more in-depth explanation on ambulance fees and what we're planning for ambulance fees. And you're going to get a deeper dive into the Behavioral Health Projects Fund. I'm going to touch on that a little bit here, but then we're going to go into more detail later. So. And this PowerPoint is literally hot off. It's not even on a press yet. It's that hot. And it has not been uploaded to the website. And we will load it after the meeting. And I have too many folders open to let me share. So give me just a second here.
Do we want to have our staff introduce themselves and their
that
roles?
would help me a lot since I have too many files open to share. Jill, yeah, for the public.
All right. Jill Jolliker, Assistant County Administrator.
Sean Peterson, Deputy County Administrator.
Brooke Sauer, Finance Manager.
Jake Broadbent, Management Analyst.
Jake, are you in the panel? I'm trying to share it, but I literally have so many screens open right now. It's not letting me pick any of them. Let me try that. Yes, finally closed enough things. Here we go. We wanted to talk a little bit about some of the themes that are influencing the 2026 budget. And for the commission, a lot of these are consistent themes over the last several years. We are working to sustain our core services while managing increasing costs for inflation and talent, which leads into the next one. We've invested a lot into our county workforce in 2025. Budget included a classification and compensation update that has been implemented and represents a significant investment to our staff that we had not done a classification and compensation analysis in over 10 years. So that was an important theme and factor into what we have building in 2026. We continue to emphasize our work in behavioral health and housing stability. The county is the largest local funder of human services, and we are continuing that work into 2026. Also, as the commissioners know, we are working to make sure our infrastructure stays ready and that our investments are well planned. We have a number of large construction projects happening nearby here, plus a lot of work on our road and bridge infrastructure. These are just the specifics. Inflation is impacting our costs of our contracts and our services. We're going to go into some detail on our revenue trends. There's some good news and some bad news. Compensation continues to be a tight market, and our service demands in this community are only increasing. So just I want to provide a little overview of our funds. So these are your property tax mill levy supported funds, operating funds. These are on your tax bill, and they have specific mill levies associated with them. The general fund is the largest of our revenue sources, and it is largely, it's about 77% funded by property tax, and to a lesser extent, sales tax. And most county services are inside the general fund. We are somewhat unusual, and we budget for employee benefits has been historically budgeted outside of the general fund. So it is also, its only revenue source is property taxes, and it funds our employee benefits, which include not just health insurance, but CAPERS, KPNF, and Social Security. And then Road and Bridge. Road and Bridge is a separate fund for us. Public Works has two smaller departments that sit in the general fund, but there are state statutes associated with gas tax that really like you to keep it segregated. So the Road and Bridge Fund receives gas tax from the state and also has its own property tax mill levy. And then we have a bunch of other funds with other revenue sources. So I have listed these somewhat in order of size. So the Behavioral Health Fund is our largest now fund that's funded with other revenue sources. It is funded in part by the behavioral health sales tax and in part by a transfer of property tax funds that are levied in the general fund. And we're going to go into more detail on that soon. There is the 1 cent county sales tax fund that supports debt service. I know it gets confusing because it says sales tax, but it funds debt. And so this is where we will pay for the debt. We're currently paying for debt that's paying off a refinanced debt issuance that was the 911 radio system and the Public Works building. That was the only existing debt we had out of it until now, when you just issued debt for the Public Safety Building and the Judicial and Law Enforcement Center project. Motor vehicle operations is a separate fee. It doesn't receive property tax. It receives fee revenues from vehicle registrations. And it's supposed to pay for the staff that support the vehicle registration process for the state of Kansas. It does not cover the amount of expense required for that fund.
And that's all set by the state.
The fees are controlled by the state. We worked in our legislative platform to try to raise those fees. We were unsuccessful. I want to go into more detail over time of really how those fees cover less and less the operation. So what this really means is that local taxpayers are subsidizing the state vehicle registration process. The next fund is our 911 Emergency Telephone Fund. It is funded for with fees that come out of your property, off your phone bill for paying for 911, and it pays for a part of your emergency dispatch services. It does not pay for all of your emergency dispatch services. Then our bond and interest fund is really just special assessments. There are several historical special assessments where the county and or property taxpayers and or other governmental entities have done a specific infrastructure project. The one I use the most is the Yankee Tank Reservoir off of Clinton Parkway, which was paid into by the county, property owners, KU. Several different folks came together and the county issued the debt for the rebuilding of that reservoir. I'm going to use the wrong word, watershed. And then folks are paying that off over time. So any fund balance in that fund has been paid by taxpayers. And we're collecting it so that they have an even payment over time. It's a very small fund and it's pretty limited. Yep.
Does that count against the 3% total debt?
I don't believe so, but I'd have to check for you on that, Commissioner. I actually no, I think it might. Let us check. Municipalities Fight Addiction is a new fund that we've had for a couple years now, which holds our settlement dollars from the national opioid settlements. And it's a pretty small fund. I think it's got around $400,000 in it right now. Jake, does that sound about right? And we're working to come up with a process that helps distribute those funds. We have used it with DECA to pay for naloxone in the last year or so. And then liquor tax in the county, and this is just on alcohol that is bought in the unincorporated area. So it's a pretty small amount. It does not include the city of Lawrence or Baldwin or Eudora. And that money is divided 3 ways. But the 2 that we get to keep some of it, and then the rest, a third is put into the Special Parks and Rec Fund, and another third is in the Special Alcohol Fund. And those are all of our operating funds.
And we had a few others that have then been consolidated because we weren't required to have those by statute.
Yeah, and those are mostly into the general. I would say the other funds that we have that are, we have some other non-budgeted, our capital funds, so our CIP fund and our equipment reserve, and you will get information on those as a part of the 2026 budget on those equipment and capital reserves and their special.
Hey guys, Coach Kenny here. So I just wanted to kind of explain this haircut. So I really raise it so that as
What's going on?
just kind of makes it so much easier because it makes the ends.
Hey, can you, it's Robin. Can someone go tell?
Thank you.
Sarah,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
Commissioner Kelly. Can you talk about the 1% sales tax? Does that all go to Douglas County?
This is our share of it. No. So it is, the city of Lawrence receives a significant, I could get you the exact percentage. I don't have the exact percentage on hand. But we have a smaller share of that 1 cent. And in that fund as well, half of the revenue from that 1 cent, it was retained in the general fund. That's that sales tax you saw on the previous slide. So half of it stays in the general fund and just offsets property taxes. And then the other half goes into this sales tax fund to support debt service.
But the 1% sales tax doesn't all go to Douglas County, correct?
No, it goes to other cities in Douglas County as well, but I don't have the exact percentage split off the top of my head.
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay. All right. My next slide. I will not advance. Oh, okay. So we did want to talk a little bit about assessed valuation growth because we do know what our assessed valuation growth will be for the 2026 budget. Assessed valuation growth will be up 5.7%. The past 5-year average of that is 7.7, and the 10-year average is just under 6. I think you can see a lot of volatility here in this space. Post-COVID, we had significant increases in assessed valuation, but it is really leveling back out to what I consider pre-pandemic levels of assessed valuation growth. The process for assessed valuation and how mill levies are set is set by the state of Kansas by Kansas statute. And it is a market-based system. So those double-digit increases in those 2 years were as a result of that state set process on how we assess property. Also want to point out that for 22, 23, and 24, over those 3 years, the county commission lowered the mill levy 6 mills to offset some of the increase that happened in those 3 years. We were virtually revenue neutral in 2024. Other revenues, this is a short list for us. If this presentation was happening in a city, there'd be a long list of other revenues that they spend a lot of time on. I want to talk a little bit about sales tax. And as commissioners know, normally that's the other big revenue I talk about when we get ready to do the budget. 2024 total sales tax collections were just over 9.7 million. This is a 0.64% increase over 2023. That is a much slower rate of growth than what I am used to seeing in this revenue source. In the 2024 budget, we had re-estimated that budget to 9.5 million. So we barely made our re-estimate number. And that is really influencing what I'm thinking about in terms of where to estimate sales tax moving forward into 2026. The good news is investment income. As commissioners know, we've had some conversations about this in the last couple months. 2024 total investment income in the general fund was just around 7.5 million. In the 25 adopted budget, we adopted a budget of 4.7. So there's a big delta there between those two numbers. I feel pretty comfortable with the 2025 re-estimated budget that we're going to lock that in at around 6.5. And that is largely because our current average, and this information is coming from our treasurer who's online. He has had a family emergency and couldn't be here today. But our current average rate is 4.18%. And their average rate for 2024 was 4.6 and then 4. So we're still holding really pretty steady with those numbers. And one of the things that's an advantage for us is that our estimates for 2026 are really already locked in based off of rates that have been set already. So that helps us. But I am really concerned. It's basically a crystal ball to know, like, are we going to be staying at rates around 4%, or are we going to be going back down to our 2022 total income for investment income was $400,000. And then last year we got 7.7. So it's a huge increase in terms of a swing. So it's a pretty volatile source for me when I'm trying to estimate where things are going to land. And, what is the new, is there a new normal is probably the question I should ask, as opposed to what is the new normal in terms of where to land on investment income. Commissioners, when you get my proposed budget, we will go into more detail on this, and really with every line in the county budget, I welcome commissioners' thoughts and inputs on how we should handle particularly this kind of volatile revenue source. And so we'll make sure we've got time in July to have that conversation. And then one of the big things that we talked about in the 2025 budget was the transition of the Senior Resource Center to a county department. And so we're going to have Jill give you a little update on that.
Sure. I think on the slide, I'm going to start at the bottom and just remind commissioners that last year during the budget process, $250,000 was set aside to support this transition, acknowledging that there would be some additional costs that would go along with that transition if it were determined that made the most sense and everybody was agreeable. And we know that is the case, and that's proceeding as planned. The transition is going to be effective October 1, 2025, and all things are moving forward really smoothly. The total impact from the 2024 to 2025 was estimated to be $220,000 in addition to the existing 2025 budget funding, which is $549,700. The personnel expenses, we talked about this when we last spoke to you all about SRC. That's the largest portion of that financial impact for SRC employees when they join the county's new compensation and classification system. And I know that, just most recently we've been talking as a staff around just things like what all can we even accommodate in terms of accounting for compression within that $250,000 that you all set aside, acknowledging that we've already spoken for most of that $250,000. Unfortunately, we're not able to do all of the impact of addressing compression, but we're able to do enough and hopefully demonstrate enough in 2025 to once they join the county's payroll, and then looking to 2026 and the proposed. We think that we're able to at least do enough to show that we want to make progress toward it, but we're not going to be able to fully address all those compression needs. But, we'll keep having that conversation with SRC staff. But just to share that, we are still trying to be thoughtful about that $250,000 and having a very limited impact beyond that, unless there's, future conversations with you all. And beyond that, I'll just say that things have been proceeding very nicely.
Yeah, so we're on budget for this transition
Yep.
for 2025. Just want to highlight some estimated plan transfers. As I mentioned, and I will keep mentioning, I am not done with the 2026 proposed budget. We are still working on it. But these are some regular plan transfers that we have. So these are estimates at this point. So please don't hold me to them. They may adjust. The ambulance reserve fund is a number that we get from LDCFM related to the number of ambulances that they need to replace. Our CIP Capital Improvement Projects Fund is our ongoing mill levy that is dedicated towards our capital improvement plan. We have almost every department has an equipment reserve where they fund depreciation on equipment and equipment. And together that's about 1.3. The sales tax fund, that's that 1 cent countywide sales tax. So that is that half of the 1 cent that is generated, and it goes into the sales tax fund to pay off debt. Behavioral health fund and behavioral health projects fund, that represents the transfer from the general fund, the property tax dollars that go into the behavioral health fund. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. That represents the property tax funds that were levied for behavioral health projects before the sales tax was passed. So it's that represents that portion of our mill levy prior to 2018 that was spent on that.
And those tend to fund those are operational supports typically.
Yep, I'll tell you the whole thing here in a second. And then we do a plan transfer to work comp fund, our workers' compensation fund. Boy, we're still using acronyms. I need to get them out of. And that is our plan transfer to support our workers' compensation fund. All right, so now we're going to dig into the behavioral health fund. And I want to really talk, I say projected at the top, but really I probably should have edited it. This is 2025. This is not 2026. This is the current year, and this is where we are today. I'm not done with the 26 budget. So this is not what you're going to see when we get the 26 budget. But I think it's an important to sort of to set the stage for what Bob's going to talk about later today on this fund. Our actual fund balance 1/1 of 25 was 20.7 million. I want to be really upfront about what that actual starting fund balance was. Our anticipated revenue for the 2025 reestimate is 12.7 million, as you see there. That includes 6.6 million of sales tax revenues and and that's not 1 cent. That's not the 1 cent. This is the behavioral health funds. We get 100% of those funds to answer Commissioner Kelly's question. And that total amount of that 1/4 cent comes to the county, and it raises, in 2025, we're estimating 6.6 million. Then 5.2 million that you saw on the previous screen represents property tax funds that were in place when the sales tax came into place. So this is part of, I think, sometimes the confusion in the community. A couple of years ago, we combined these things together because as the county has a long history of supporting behavioral health work, both operations and capital. And we thought, let's just put it all together in one fund so that we can more effectively manage it, because it was really awkward to have two accounts and who was in what account. So we blended these two. But the 1/4 cent sales tax does not generate $12.7 million a year. It generates 6.6. And then the commissioners are taking, these were things large support of Bert Nash that was in place on the mill levy before the sales tax was put into place. And then in 18, we raised taxes approximately $2 million, $1.9 million specifically for behavioral health. And that is represented with those funds. So those are those percentages. Then in 2025, the commission approved 3.2 million in one-time expenditures to go towards capital projects in the community. So that money is on its way of being spent right now. That's going to projects like 9th Street Missionary Baptist. It's doing supportive housing in the community. DECA for transitional women's transitional supportive housing. And I'm going to forget the rest, but they're on a slide. So you'll see those in a minute. If this fund is like every other fund in the county, we need a fund balance target. And that is calculated based off of the ongoing revenue. And that, if you calculate it off that 12.7, should be around 3.2 million. So even if, so I have to subtract that from the calculus above, because if not, I don't have it. And this is an operating fund. It pays for salaries and community partners work in the community. So that means if I do all of that math, 14.4 would be available above that 3.2 million for one-time capital projects. I'm going to go back to the big number in the middle in a second. But a portion of that reserve needs to be retained as an operating reserve. The bolded numbers there are just 2025. It is not representative of what we have in the 26 budget where I'm at today, but it tells you what we did in 2025, which means that we anticipated revenue of 12.7 million and we anticipated ongoing expenditures of 10.8, which means that we had some ongoing revenue that was not already obligated for ongoing operations. That was a lot, but I'll keep moving through some of these slides. So another thing that happened in 2025 with the Behavioral Health Projects Fund, and so that the county commission could lower the mill levy 2.9 mills, they moved $917,172 in projects that were previously supported by the general fund to the Behavioral Health Fund without additional support. And it was done so that we could lower the mill levy. And those projects are listed there. It includes behavioral health court, it includes funds for drug court, court alternatives, which will help, which funds a variety of different things right now, but also could be used to expand drug court, and the behavioral health project staff. And then the commissioners added one new big project in 2025 for ongoing obligation, and it was $600,000 on the flexible housing pool. So those together, that's 1.5 million that was obligated in 2025 that had not been obligated in the past. These are ongoing expenses, and they're ongoing expenses of the fund.
Sarah, where did the behavioral health court funding come from before it got moved in here?
General fund property tax.
Oh, okay.
So by moving it over here and not bringing the property tax with it, it allowed the commissioners to lower the mill levy.
We had other things that we also did.
Yes.
Towards the
Yes.
levy reduction, but
You
this
did.
was one.
This is
one
the
of
big part of it. Another big thing that you did is you lowered the mill levy in the employee benefits fund by 2 mills. So that's way bigger than that whole equation. So, yeah. This is a listing of the one-time projects that were listed on that previous table. Some work on Zero Suicide, Cardinal Housing Network, City of Lawrence for the Family Emergency Shelter, a specialty court assessment, and some startup funding for Mirror for SUD services. So that's that 3.1. Those are one-time. They're not ongoing obligations. And so this is an example of this 3.1 or 3.2 million of the types of projects we can continue to do in the community if that $14 million is reserved for capital projects. So we've been able, and I think we'll go into more detail about that when we get to the 2026 budget. You know, we spent a lot of funds on our CARES Act and ARPA funding to do a lot of really tremendous supportive housing work in this community. Those funds are gone. That money has been spent. So what we need moving forward to be able to continue to make the progress we want to make on supportive housing is access to that behavioral health projects reserve.
And Sarah, if I could just add on these in particular, they're it's one-time funding, but the part of the consideration that went into recommending these requests and ultimately when the commission decided to fund them was a sustainability model. We looked at what was included in the proposal and what was the plan to operate these units, and we believed it was a sound operating model. So the one-time investment, we had a real solid thought that it was going to be a sustainable project and a solid investment for us.
We also always stressed that there's braided funding that went with it, that they weren't solely relying on the county for these projects, but that they were really kind of using the whole scope of options at their disposal. And this was one piece that helped get them to a sustainable place.
100%. And that was a great conversation that we had with you all in the past year about that, really emphasizing that braided funding approach.
So this is your preview of your preview, your teaser on your teaser for the 2026 budget. We are working with 58 requests from departments and community partners totaling around $10 million. That number is actually down a little bit from previous years, but the categories of those, the county departments have asked for 2.9 million in those supplemental requests, and community partners have asked for 7.2. Of that 7.2, our estimation is 6.1 million could be are eligible for the behavioral health sales tax. But as you saw above, our delta of what we have room to afford inside that tax is less than 2 million. And then this is a timeline of where we're at in terms of the budget process. This is a very tentative date, media partners who are listening. I am hoping that our proposed budget will be released to the media by June 27th. Budget hearings with the Board and County Commissioners start July 7th. In the past, last year we got done in 3 mornings. I anticipate it will take us longer this year. And so when we transition from budget hearings to deliberations, I think is something the commission needs to talk about as we move through that process. I will know more once I start scheduling those and have a sense of how much time we need. So somewhere between the 11th and the 10th, and then starting again on Monday, the 14th, commissioners will begin deliberations. And we are really hoping we wrap up by July 16th because on July 20th, we need to notify the county clerk of if it's a statutory deadline, if our intent to exceed the revenue neutral rate. So we work hard to try to make sure commissioners know as much as humanly possible about where their budget is going to be by the time we have to tell the clerk what he puts in the notice. So that's why everything really we try to get done by July 20th.
So every jurisdiction
Is subject to that.
is subject to that.
Yeah.
Some of them just say, this is a target we're going to stay below. We're kind of unique in that we really try and say, this is really where we think we're going to be.
Agreed.
for that.
Yeah. Many of the cities sort of set a ceiling and don't let themselves go over it. And we try to be as precise as possible by that point in time. We're scheduling that we will do at a 4:00 work session on July 30th, a deeper review of projects in your capital improvement project fund and the budget hearing for Consolidated Fire District number 1. It's kind of nice to do those a little bit later. Commissioners, you will, in the proposed budget you get from me, you will not get a complete CIP project list by that June 27th date. You will get an allocation number, and then our hope is by July 7th, when you start hearings, that you'll have a project list for CIP. And then that gives you that time between July 7th and July 30th to review those projects under CIP. So, but that allows us to get all of this done to adopt a budget on time that includes a 5-year capital improvement plan. August 9th is when the revenue neutral rate intent letters are sent by the county clerk to taxpayers. We will have our notices in the newspaper by August 11th, and then our public hearing for the 2026 budget will be August 27th.
Within that timeline, what is the time frame where it would be most helpful for the public to be watching and engaged and communicating with commissioners or communicating at public comment?
Anytime, starting now. Definitely, once the proposed budget is released, we're going to work hard to try to get it scanned and available on our website. Commissioners know you get a very large, voluminous notebook, so there's a lot of material in it. But early and often, as they say, would be great for the community to participate. What I would really say is that those hearings starting on July 7th, we don't take public comment in those morning sessions, but we will have commission meetings each of those Wednesdays. And if you're paying attention or you go home and you watch it on YouTube and you have thoughts and questions, you should be contacting commissioners while we're in that deliberative process. Please don't wait till you get your R&R notice in your mailbox. Please engage early and often. And commissioners, that's what I have for you for this preview. I really would love to give you more, but we're not quite there yet. But I can try to answer any questions that you have, and if you have information in terms of how we approach the 26 budget.
Thank you, Sarah. That was great. I really appreciate the overview. We've asked a few questions throughout, but commissioners, any questions top of mind? Welcome, Commissioner Anderson.
Thank you. Apologize. I was late. The skies were closed and I was stuck on a runway for quite some time.
Oh, no.
I guess one of the first questions I have is, when will we receive the budget book?
I'm hoping to give it to you in advance before the media release. So it'll probably be that last week in June.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I know this was a push and a stretch on staff to get us this much of a preview this far in advance of the full book. And I know we have a very small staff that works on budget, and you've worked very hard to get us to a budget that will be proposed to come to us. So I really appreciate that. I think it gives us a chance to continue dialoguing in the public about, I think, as we'll talk in our business meeting, especially around the behavioral health conversation. I think there's just a lot of misunderstandings about that, and we're just wanting to have as much information in front of the public to have good conversations as possible. So I just appreciate the work that went into it. It's incredibly complicated because of state statute, and just we're a large and complex organization, and I know that it takes a lot to keep us rolling.
Yeah, and last week we had 2 weeks ago, we had a really good conversation around the budget options related to LDCFM. That's an important factor and stakeholder driving where we come into the budget. I really don't want to end this work session without really expressing my profound gratitude to Brooke Sauer and to Jake Broadbent for their tremendous work on the development of this proposed budget. This has been a challenging year for us, and we've really changed how we've approached the development of it. This is really our second year also using an online budget application tool for community partners to submit their budgets, and for departments to submit that. None of that could be done without our tremendous IT department that has supported us along the way. It has built new forms for you all to review and evaluate as you come through budget. So we've been, I think Jake said, I've seen about six full versions of the budget at this point, and I think I probably have a couple more to do.
Thank you so much, and appreciate everyone's work on the budget, as well as our community partners.
Yeah.
I believe it's been through multiple iterations.
Yeah, community partners submitted their budgets in April, and most of them met with me as a result of that process. They then made revisions to those forms and documents that you're going to get in that notebook. There have been multiple drafts and reiterations from their perspective too, and even their requests have changed. So that's really the value of this process, is that we start early and everyone's at the table, and we allow departments to and community partners to build as strong of a request as they possibly can. So.
And being that Commissioner Dorsey and I are new to this process, as we move through it and either community partners and or residents have questions about the budget and we begin to meet with individuals, should we meet with partners and residents with other commissioners and with you, or how should we engage in that process outside of the actual budget work session?
I mean, I'm certainly glad to meet with commissioners if they have questions from the community and or community partners. I'm certainly, pretty quick here. I'm going to be able to turn my attention to be able to support you in the development of this. So I'd say please ask us if you have questions and assistance and want to build into that. I also anticipate you're just going to have a lot of really basic questions about like, oh, where does this money come in and how does it go out and what is that authorization for? So I really like talking about budget. So I'm very happy to talk to you and others about this process and explain where we are and why we've done what we've done. So please reach out and have other folks reach out to us. And I think there'll be more information in my proposed budget that'll help make some sense of that. And we'll be able to fully share the details of what's been asked for and where we're at.
Okay. And so outside of the budget work sessions, we don't host like any other like community conversons or
Yeah,
sessions?
so we've never really hosted
Okay.
like a pre-budget public hearing. That's something I think we could add in a different year. We could certainly do more of that. This is an opportunity really for the community to begin to get engaged with where we are. You will also get a budget overview as we get closer to that July 7th. If I can release that early, I will. And that has a lot of really great just synthesis, high level information about where we're sitting in terms of the budget. So there'll be some of that with the media release. We'll put some of that in the press release as well. So we try to put out those big themes of where our revenue's at, what's been included, what are the challenges and drivers on our budget, and what have we done. So I think we could always do a better job of summarizing what we do. We tend to show you everything, which can make it difficult to filter through. So I'm also really interested from commissioners' impact or commissioners' perspectives. What do you think we should be highlighting to the community to make it more digestible? Because right now, a 5-inch notebook is not very digestible for most members of our community.
Okay. All right. Appreciate it. So after, our first year of learning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really look forward to providing feedback and listen and learn so far.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that question, Commissioner Anderson. And I would say, just some insight into my process year after year is that I think year after year, I've had fewer questions, certainly for Sarah and staff, but that there's a lot of communication with staff leading up to those public hearings and deliberations amongst us that I think are really useful and helpful for you to get the nuts and bolts in the first year. And I also think that our hearings and how much time we dedicate to being in this space together to have a conversation as a whole commission and be able to ask direct questions of community partners that maybe we've had some discussion in individual meetings or email exchanges with those community partners before, but for all of us as commissioners to be able to hear each other's questions and thought processes about the different requests that we really have available to us for consideration. I find that to be a really helpful and thoughtful process. And I think my experience has also been that with each year comes a little bit more community engagement. I think that looks different. And we have tried to, be conscious of that. And like Sarah said, continue to think about how to implement new processes or forms, things that might make it more streamlined, because we do the county shares a significant amount of detail about our budget process publicly compared to other local governments. That really does have a lot of context and meat behind it. So I think that's always the balance of that full transparency and also how do we make it make the most sense. I don't know how helpful that was, but and certainly now that we are a 5-member commission, I think, that we should feel free to think about a commissioner to connect with and sort of ask some questions and get some perspective from one of us, if that also feels useful in your first read of the book.
I appreciate that. That would be useful. Thank you.
And just to cover again, the outline of the hearings that will happen on July 7th. So we will have them scheduled by, we try to put departments and or community partners together that have collaborative work together. So if that's both internally or with a community partner. And then a member of our team, so these folks at this table and Bob and Katie will, if it's scheduled for, our criminal justice, our law enforcement partners, Katie, since that's her area where she liaisons with those departments, she will provide you a brief overview of what's happening with those departments, what their total budget is, some information, and then highlight like what supplemental requests they have. And really the materials that we're trying to prepare for you should stand on their own. I don't let them bring in big PowerPoint presentations and spend an hour. That's why we do all this work ahead of time, is so that their materials stand on their own as much as they possibly can. But then they will be at that table to answer questions for you related to their supplemental request or what's happening in the community regarding that work. So oftentimes, it's an opportunity for the courts to talk to us about what's happening, similar to kind of how we did the department overviews. So some of that work that we did earlier this year, that's there'll be some general conversation on those things. And really, that's just really a time for commissioners to ask a lot of questions. We don't really get into a lot of deliberating at that point in time because we want you to have time to sit and think about it as a whole. And then we have a spreadsheet worksheet tool that will give you the help put your thoughts together and give to staff in advance. And that really helps guide us through our deliberations process.
And I thank you for that, Sarah. I do tend to think of, especially the supplemental requests that we have available to us to consider as, I hope for that to tell me everything I need to know to be able to sort of make a value judgment about it in the context of the totality of everything else, right? There are always clarifying questions. There are always maybe some more granular details that one or some of us are seeking, and those hearings are really great for that. But I think that staff has done a lot of work in recent years in improving this process to try and make sure that the forms are as thorough and, well thought through so that commissioners really have full information from the get-go. And I also just wanted to share that I do think, excuse me, there has been a lot of work done in recent years also to clean up, for lack of a better phrase, like the list of funds that we have. So while, what you shared with us, Sarah, tonight is still a fairly hefty list of funds that when I started in 2021, my first budget cycle, that list was exponentially longer, more confusing, hard to just understand why dollars had to move the way that they had been set up to move. And so I really see that progress year over year, that it is a much more understandable set of funds, and some with very distinct, rules and special regulations around and other revenue sources. And so that's noticeable to me. And I just wanted to highlight that part of your presentation and be grateful for it, because that first year I was real tripped up about the number of funds and all the labels and what the different sort of rules of engagement with them were. And I think you guys have done a lot of work to make better sense of that.
Yeah, each fund has a specific state statute that we're required to follow for setting up of the fund. So the general fund and the statutes around the general fund give us the most flexibility in terms of how operating funds are used and what revenues it can receive, which is why we've really tried to consolidate funds into the general.
I know in years past, it was quite a process to just get the information from especially community partners, not so much from our own departments, but to get the information we asked for, to have it be complete, to have financial documents that we ask for be submitted. How are we doing with that? Because, that's been something that I've highly valued, is that our partners do the homework we ask them to do in terms of presenting us with financial documents. How are we doing?
I will probably be more zen about this in a couple weeks. At this point in time, I think it's as good as we can get it, Commissioner. I am not 100% happy with the state of every community partner request in terms of complete spreadsheets and spreadsheets using our format and spreadsheets that tie to their 990s and that information, but it's as good as we can do. We have been working with community partners for 2 months to get here. And at a certain point, I just have to put it in a notebook and give it to you. And then maybe you can convince them that it needs to be in a better format, because this is about as good as I can do.
And I know we have some, very professional, very high dollar community partners. And we have some that are pretty scrappy or new. And so
Try to understand everybody.
we do. But in terms of like presenting their 990s to us throughout the course of the year, do we have any folks that are still falling down on that, or are we complete?
Nope. We're complete, and that drive that I've sent to commissioners includes their service agreements and community partner agreements in their tax. So that we have made tremendous progress on, and I feel really good about that. And just so folks that are listening, or for new commissioners, just a reminder, the commissioners have set a limit of $80,000 that if it receives community partner funding under $80,000, they have a community partner agreement, which is a lot less requirements on it and does not require as many key performance indicators. It's a much easier agreement and it provides them upfront funding. Anything above $80,000, they need to invoice us. They provide us with key performance measures. They have a scope of work for the work that they do. And it's, so they have that. And I feel really to me, the next evolution of this flywheel is to really highlight those more and more of those key performance indicators that we are getting, have them available to the public on more of a dashboard. We're got to get there. And then also to highlight it to commissioners so that you can use it to make decisions and help further drive your decision making. I think, 2 years ago, we didn't even have everyone's 990. So we're making a lot of progress.
I know last year we tried something new, and having within the supplemental requests that came from community partners, we had you kind of rate those. So you give us a proposed budget, but then everything's on the table and we have our deliberations about that. But that was it was a useful tool for guidance. We didn't follow it completely as your suggestion went, but we really valued that we had it. So I don't know if that's something you were planning to do this year or not.
Yeah, we are going to be rating supplemental requests, and you will get that recommendation from staff. We're going to continue to use the high, medium, low metric, and we'll give you a little bit of a description as to why we rated certain things high, medium, and low. And we do that both for community partners and for departments. So you'll get that as well. And that'll be a part of your proposed budget packet. And, as I've talked about when we had the LDCFM work session, commissioners, my responsibility is to give you a balanced budget that meets all of our state statutes and all our state obligations. And it is prepared in accordance with that work. I also give you, unless I receive direction from the commission otherwise, I give you a budget with a flat mill levy, and that maintains services. So that is what I am looking to do as we put together the proposed budget, is a flat mill levy that maintains services.
Thank you, Sarah. Commissioner Kelly, any questions from afar?
Not that far. I have some questions about the behavioral health sales tax, but I'm going to wait until we have our regular business meeting, as some of those questions may be answered then.
Great. And we can certainly pop these slides back up if that's helpful at that time.
Thank you.
Great. All right, commissioners in the room, any other questions for Sarah or the rest of our admin team for now? Okay, seeing none, thank you so much. We really appreciate the preview, and we're excited to dig in more soon. With that, we are recessed until our 5:30 business meeting.